The reason we're doing this today really is to have Travis make his statements to the public as well as us, because I think people have to get to know him. Many of you in the room know Travis, but it's important that we have this as part of the interview process. Anytime we would interview for a candidate, we normally would have a public session, and this is really the public session. It is an opportunity for, if you have any questions, kind of nuance of how you can do this, how you can do that, feel free to ask them. But it's really an opportunity to pretend you're the public and you're getting a new chief and you're not necessarily know him or not know him. So if Travis doesn't answer a question as well as you'd like, just ask that follow-up question that you think will help clarify what he's doing. But I do, last week when we went through everybody, we went through this, and the open meeting law always makes it difficult because when you get your final three candidates, then they're public, and that's typically what we get into is people, oh, maybe I don't want my boss to know I'm applying for this job. So we're victims of that. We're also victims. We have a great candidate. So let the day go and ask the questions you want, and make sure you, when you're thinking your questions, what might the public think they want to know that we're not quite getting. So thank you for your service.
Thank you. And then one last thing, even though he does know everybody that's in here, we will still do introductions. So I think that's all I had. And then I'll pass it on to Mike.
Appreciate it. Thank you for being here. Want to especially thank our committee members, our department personnel who have been with this process from the start. Much appreciation for that. So we really appreciate all the time that you put into this. I also just want to make one announcement too about logistics in the room. In addition to the announcements, and thanks to Camilla for going through how we're going to handle the process this morning, we will not be doing questions of the candidate from the audience members. We just ask the audience members you're welcome to listen in, ask any questions following the process, but the formal interview process really is that of the selection committee. And then when we wrap that up, as Camilla noted, the mayor and I will go upstairs and we'll meet with the candidate to talk about last steps. So just really appreciate everyone being here, and we'll do those introductions, but thanks, special thanks to Camilla, to Jill for getting us to this point, and we really look forward to this discussion with Travis today. So with that, we will turn it back to HR, and we'll welcome in the interim chief here when he's ready to go. Thank you.
Well, thank you for being here, interim chief. We are ready for you, so you can go ahead and get started.
Great. Thanks, everybody, for being here this morning.
Yes. Oh, yes. We will introduce ourselves. See, that was part of the instructions. I am so sorry. Jill, want to start with you?
Resources.
Mike Rothinger, City Administrator.
John Strand, City Commission.
Bill Mahoney, Mayor.
Rocky Schneider with the Downtown Community Partnership and the city's Business Improvement District.
Sean Gamrod, Sergeant, Fargo Police.
Sarah Cruz, Fargo Police.
Joel Erickson, Lieutenant, Fargo Police.
Jean Severson, Records Manager with the Fargo Police.
Landon Smith, Patrol, Fargo Police.
Susan Thompson, Finance Director, City of Fargo.
Gary Lorenz, Fire Chief, City of Fargo.
Good morning. We good to go? All right, thank you. This is probably one of my least favorite things, being the center of attention. However, we are going to talk about a couple of my favorite topics, and that is strategy and the Fargo Police Department. I think I've gone through this presentation probably 100 times in my head, made all kinds of slides and a number of things, and immediately deleted that because I realized that that's not really who I am. So hopefully what you leave here today with is who I am, what I'm about, and what the philosophy is going to be for the police department. How do you share with the community, with the department, and all of our other partners in the city of Fargo, what our strategy looks like in a very short period of time? So I'm going to try to make the best use of my time. When I've practiced this, it's went 5 minutes to about an hour and a half. So hopefully we'll land someplace in the middle. One thing that you need to know about me is that the change isn't dramatic. I'm not a dramatic person. So if you're looking for dramatic change, I wouldn't be your person. I lead more with stability, focused on performance, and what our long-term future plans will look like. So as I start to think about that, I was looking around my office, and if you've ever been in my office, you'll wonder if I just moved in or if I'm moving out. but there's a quote that made me think really, really hard and long about where we're going and what we're doing. And that's, good teams become great when they submit the me for the we. So what does that look like for the police department? What does that look like for the city of Fargo? What does that look like for all of us as a community? What it means is, very simply, we are better together, meaning collaboration. There are a lot of things that we can do as individuals, but there's almost nothing that we can accomplish without a team. Take any aspect of the city of Fargo, whether you're a business owner, whether you're a department head, whether you're at the police department, everything that we do together. We rely on one another, and that collaboration is how we get things done. Without that, it's extremely, extremely difficult. So something else I like to say to our people is it's not about the name on the name tag, it's about the name on the patch, Fargo. Fargo is our true north. Fargo is our sense of belonging in our mission. So the question at hand is, how do we engage with the department as the new chief and with philosophy? What does that look like? Very simply put, it starts with listening. Listening with the intent to understand. Not listening with the intent to reply, but listening with the intent to understand. Many times issues, concerns are brought to us either as a police department, a department head, a business owner, but we need to get to the root cause. What is that root cause? We might be hearing about an issue, but that issue really truly isn't the issue. There's a root cause that then caused that issue. We have to work together to figure what those things out, or figure how to figure those things out. So collaboration. Think of our agency. We have 232 people, sworn and civilian. Inside of that, I look at that as 232 problem solvers. So whatever the issue might be, I'm not the one who's going to have all the ideas. But when we work together, we can come up with a strategy. So today, it won't be a perfect strategy. It will be part of the strategy. That strategy being bringing everybody together so that we can work through all the issues at all levels of the organization, all levels of the city, and all levels of the community. What I mean by that is different experiences equal different perspectives. So if you think about specifically the police department, grab a line level person and ask them what the issue of the day is. It might vary, 232 different opinions as to what that issue might be. It doesn't mean that it's not important, it's just from their perspective, that is the issue. And we have to remember that as we're listening to them. But that's the point, listening with the intent to understand. Next, we have to work on our strategy. That strategy might look different depending on which work group you're in. Take that now into the community. For a business owner, that strategy might look a little different. Take areas of town. The areas of town might have a different strategy. It might look a little different from their perspective as to what those issues are. So it is really important that we listen with the intent to understand so that we can truly help them with their issue and they feel heard. Most importantly, feeling heard. So to do this, we have to gather the facts. We have to make sure that we stay on task. We assess, we strategize, and then of course, after we implement said strategy, what do we have to do? We'll have to do that whole process over again. Because as an organization, as a city, you can just imagine how much we've evolved over the last number of years. Things that we did 5 years ago don't necessarily apply today. We've learned lessons from 5 years ago, but we need to apply the new lessons, the new strategies, and continued growth through performance, stability, and long-term strategy. Something as a city we are all wrestling with on a regular basis. We can't fix issues that we don't talk about. So it is important that when we are discussing things with people, whether it's in the community, a business owner, or within our own organization, that again, we're listening with that intent to understand. It's truly difficult if you don't understand the problem at its core level to fix it. And sometimes it's not necessarily fixing the problem, it's just being heard. Having someone else understand your problem, maybe even empathize with them. It's a complex issue many times, and it takes more than one perspective, one person, maybe one resource. There are so many things that make the big machine of the city of Fargo run, and bringing all those things together and making them work together so that the machine is in full performance ends up being a very difficult task. So as a department, how do we engage the department? It starts with listening to what their concerns are, working on those things. I went back and thinking about the last, I'll say 65 days, because in the last 65 days I've had one day where I haven't done something work-related. So in the last 65 days, I think about some of the conversations I've had with people. One of the first conversations I had started with our captains group. And I asked them a couple of questions, and those questions were, what are you doing today that you shouldn't be? And what aren't you doing that you should be? And I want you to think about that with your work groups, and I want you to pass that question along and start thinking through this so that we can engage the department and find out where the inefficiencies are so that we can work on those efficiencies. So as those conversations ensued, we stumbled upon a few things, important things, some that are low-hanging fruit. Again, those are going to help us develop our strategy as it relates to what are the next steps for the chief of police in the Fargo Police Department. Culture always seems to be a hot topic for people. So how do you fix culture? How do you work on culture? How do you build culture? To me, that also starts with teamwork, listening, collaboration. Those words are really important because, again, as you listen to the different pieces, depending on which work group, you might have a different culture or subculture. That's important to recognize, but at the same time, we have one organization. So the other task to the captains was that we needed to become aligned, not necessarily thinking the same, but we needed to be in alignment. Meaning, if for whatever reason we changed chairs, would we have to then revamp the whole organization, revamp the whole structure, revamp shift schedules or assignments or whatever? We shouldn't have to do that. We should be in alignment. Now, each person should be an improvement. So we've built the foundation, building block, and then we're going to improve upon that when the next person comes in that chair, because again, they bring a different perspective. So engaging the department sounds and looks like listening with the intent to understand, and then strategizing together to work on whatever those issues, concerns, whatever it might be. So to the department members that are listening today, I would just like to say one thing. Don't panic. You might hear conversation about certain things, like scheduling, shift structure, organizational structure. All we're trying to do is have conversation about all the possibilities. Today, a military call-up could change the face of our organization immediately. We need to be prepared for that. It's not, we are not in crisis, but we do have to have honest conversation about what staffing, structure, and those things can look like, not just for today, but what it looks like in 5 years and in 10 years. We do have to work on today. We have to figure out what that looks like, but more importantly, we have to worry about tomorrow and the next day and the next month and then the next year. If we don't do that, the other department heads also will have issue, because now we are trying to play catch up, whether it relates to a financial issue, staffing issue, which becomes a financial issue as it relates to equipment, all kinds of things. Those problems can grow. How do we engage the community? So, again, it starts with listening. Depending on which part of the community you go into, you will hear different issues. They're all important issues. Some are simple solutions, some are extremely complex, but a word that sticks in my mind with all of that is, again, collaboration. Pick your favorite issue. I know each of you have immediately jumped to an issue. Take that issue and try and solve it yourself. We're all sitting in this room because we can't solve those issues by ourselves. So, the unhoused. That's not an issue that the police department can fix by itself. We need partners, we need funding, and we need other people that can help us with that. Drug addiction. Drug addiction is not specifically the police department's problem. However, we're typically the first resource that deals with somebody in an addiction situation. But you need resources, you need funding, you need treatment centers. Not specifically a police issue, but it's a wraparound service that we all need to be a part of to work through together. Mental health. That's an important issue. Again, police department ends up being the tip of the spear many times. However, We can't solve that ourselves. We aren't just counselors. We don't have places to take them. We can't prescribe medications. There are so many things about mental health that we can help with, but again, it takes that collaboration. So as it relates to engaging the community, we have to bring our partners and share information and share perspective and listen with the intent to understand the other side. It gets very, very complex very, very fast. You can go into South Fargo. If we go and ask a community member in South Fargo today, what's their issue? Many would say dangerous driving. We wrote 15,000 tickets last year. Did we change behavior? For some, I would imagine for some, but it's going to take more than just the Fargo Police Department to solve that issue, because as soon as they cross 52nd Avenue and over into West Fargo or over into Moorhead, they have the same issue. It's our issue. It's our problem as a community, not just specifically the Fargo Police Department. So how do we work together collaboratively inside of the community? We need to make sure that our city prosecutors are on board. We need to make sure that our state's attorney's office is on board. So as we work through these problems, again, it takes a collaborative effort with the judicial system, with our community members, keeping us apprised of the situation, making sure that they know and that we know that they are heard, meaning they don't just listen to the cars driving by on 52nd Avenue without giving us a call and letting us know what's going on. We have to be able to work through those things in real time. Same thing in the downtown area. We can't work on issues that we're not aware of. So you need to call. You need to let us know what's going on in the downtown. It was really interesting this last week as we took a walk through downtown and we were speaking with some of the business members. Great conversation, and each one had a very different perspective depending on which business you stopped at. That's no different than the individuals at the police department or other members in the community, other business owners. They're looking at it from their perspective. We have to take all this stuff in, and then we have to come up with a strategy as a collaborative effort, as a community, as a business group, as a police department, as to how we're going to work on these things together. And it starts with conversation. It starts with collaboration. Difficult at times, just because people sometimes are very specific, meaning individually specific, very focused on their part of that issue. Back to, we just need to listen to each other, to keep each other apprised, understand, follow up. That was something that I learned very quickly in our conversations with some of the downtown business owners. It was just the follow-up. The officers were coming. It was the follow-up that didn't happen afterward. They didn't know the outcome. That's difficult for us many times. Not in that situation, because following up with them could be pretty easy, but maybe with our media partners on a difficult case. Sometimes that follow-up, we just can't discuss it. So it makes it very, very difficult for everybody to have a true grasp and scope and understanding of the whole situation, because there are details that we can't necessarily share with people. And it's not that we are hiding anything, it's just that it could be damaging to the case. There are reasons that we aren't allowed to do that, and we don't want to do that because of the collaboration. We don't want to change the outcome of this case for our state's attorney's office or for our victims because of the information that we released at the wrong period of time, which is sometimes difficult for people to understand. So as we think about engaging with the community, using data to drive where we're going, drive what we're doing, drive the resources that we have where they need it to be. But on the flip side of that, we need to listen to what people are telling us about that information. Statistics are great. Statistics tell us a lot of things. Statistics point us in the right direction. If you're in the financial world or other places, numbers mean a lot. They mean a lot to me as I'm trying to figure a lot of things out in my current roles and responsibility. But behind each one of those numbers is a person, is a situation, is a victim. So we have to remember that as we're working through that data. Data is important, but we have to remember that there are people behind that. So engaging with the community in that sense is extremely important. Our media partners that are in the back of the room, it's really important that we work together, that collaborative effort with our media partners. I learned something very quickly already in just the last handful of days after meeting with a number of our media partners. It truly started with just listening to what their concerns are, what it was they needed from us as a department, and what I could provide them as an individual. I believe that very quickly, it was easy to come to a common ground. They want information. I want to make sure that they get accurate information in a timely manner. However, sometimes as situations are evolving, we can't give that information because we don't know all of the information that we can give them yet. So that will be a partnership as we work through that to figure out when's the best time and place for that to be. It's not that we don't want to communicate, it's just our top priority is public safety. So if we're dealing with something, we're going to make sure that the situation is safe first, and then we will begin working on relaying the information. The great thing about the police department and the city of Fargo is we have communications people that we can use, communications team that we can use, a collaborative effort. So while we are dealing with this problem, we can have help with the communication side on the other part. So what was really interesting to me is as I met with one of the media partners, I did this twice. If you know anything about me, if the meeting starts at 8, I'm here at 7:30 because I just want to make sure that I'm here on time. So I showed up about an hour early for both of the media interviews, and I just sat and listened to how they were conducting business. One gave me a tour of their facility. It was really, really interesting as we were walking through that they started sharing some of these details, like, hey, this would be really interesting, or this would be great if you were able to share with us this, or when you have a priority message, here's a group of people that you could contact and that we would help share that message. Might seem very, very simple, but what I felt after that was they felt like they just shared information that they didn't think we knew. So now we can use that in our next emergency or whatever the next situation is. So engaging with our community is extremely important, and we can use engaging with the media as a strong partnership to do that as a vehicle to travel, to send that information to. This is one of my favorite ones, engaging. How would I, or as a department, how would we engage with the rest of the city of Fargo? For me, it just makes me smile because I think of all the situations that we deal with on a daily basis, down to putting the key in the car and driving away. How do we do that? Well, that's Ben Dow's team over at Central Garage, working countless hours trying to make sure that that happens. Every other Friday we get paid. That's finance, that's HR. There's so many people that are involved in so many of the details that we do every day that sometimes get forgotten. But it all starts with listening. So in a situation that I was recently involved with, I went to another department head and I was trying to explain a situation. And he became frustrated with me. I appreciated his frustration because I understood where it was coming from, but I was trying to relay to him, like, I just want to solve this problem. If we can't solve it this way, how can we? So I went to a trusted source. I asked some advice, and this trusted source said to me, the only time people go to that person is when they need something, and they're usually trying to pull one over on them. And I thought, interesting. I bet he thinks I'm trying to pull one over on him. So we went back to the table, and I shared with him, listen, I'm not trying to pull one over on you. I have this issue. I have this problem. I need your help solving this problem. I understand that we tried to solve it this way previously. That's not working for us today. That worked 5 years ago, but it doesn't work today. How can we do this now? And it wasn't but 2 hours later after that conversation, this person called and said, I've got an idea. What do you think? And we worked through it, and we were able to solve that issue. That's working together. That's how you engage with other department heads. There will be time that the police department has to make a sacrifice. I've said this numerous times in financial meetings and the cabinet meetings. There will be times that the police department will have to make a sacrifice so that another department or some other piece of the city of Fargo has to take priority, whatever that is. And then there will be times that other departments are going to have to make sacrifices so that the police department can move forward with whatever that might be, staffing, equipment, or whatever that might be. It's really important, though, that as you listen to other people, that you truly understand what their issues are as well. So I think of Tim Dirks at the library. He invited me into one of his facilities meetings on planning, on expansion. And I got lost in the conversation because I started wondering, why was I in that conversation? And as we worked through this, he started relaying of, I always hear the police department talking about like substations and small places where you could write a report or use a bathroom. And if we build another library, I'd like to provide that for you. That's it. That's what I'm talking about. Because we were on the same page, because he's heard us talk about that, he was thinking about how that could work together. I can think of numerous other examples, but it's strategy like that. It's listening to each other with the intent to understand. That's how we will figure out the growth that we're trying to deal with in the city of Fargo. Department heads working with other department heads, no one trying to bully or push over another department, but truly working together in collaboration of, we have this goal. The goal for the city of Fargo is to make sure that we're providing all these services, make sure that we're providing public safety, making sure that the big machine runs every single day. And that gets really complex, really fast, especially when you're working on funding shortages, staffing shortages. I don't think that there's a department in the city that feels like they have everything, all of the tools that they need to do their job. However, we have hired amazing people all across the city, and they do an amazing job every single day with limited resources, limited funding, limited people, limited equipment, but they always make do. But that's the Fargo way. That's just how we do it, which is really important, because the people in our community need to recognize how much work, time, and effort it takes on a daily basis to make all these things happen, from the smallest thing to a large-scale incident that involves all of us, whether it's the flood fight or just trying to address a specific community group that's got an issue. So, summarizing, what does this look like? Collaboration. What does it look like for me? Me as potentially the next police chief. I'd take you back probably, I think it's been 2 weeks, on a Friday in the afternoon. There was a threat called in at North High. So the police department immediately goes to work. The SRO, who's been trained, he starts making the call. He starts working through the processes of the lockdown with the school. The school part then comes in. So we've got a lieutenant who doesn't happen to be at work that day, but is on the phone with the school district and starting to work through the plan. Incident command gets set up. Sergeant is there. Sheriff Johnner and some of his folks show up. Chief Lorenz and his people start to show up. We all start working together, figuring out what the next steps will look like. No one moving without the other before a strategy is discussed. Dr. Steiner is a great example of that. Dr. Steiner was able to come over and joined us at the incident command and was part of that decision-making process. The city wasn't messaging before the school district was messaging. They were messaging together. Again, the priority being safety of the school, but the community obviously wants information, and they want information quickly. Imagine being a parent with your child in that school. You want to know what's going on in that school. Afterwards, I think that's what you really truly see, the collaboration and the thanks, not only from Dr. Steiner and the school group, but each of the individual agencies that were represented that day. We all stood together at a press brief immediately afterwards, where we shared information with not only the public, but through our media partners. That was extremely important because, again, in my world, collaboration is truly how we get all that done. So who got left out? Well, in that situation, I don't necessarily see that anybody got left out. The media got the press brief that they were looking for. The community got the message that they were looking for. Each department was represented. Each department had a specific role and responsibility during that event, all through collaboration. And that starts with being there. That starts with being a part of it and leading that through conversation, not just that day, but in the weeks, months, and years leading up to that. The collaboration with the fire department. We've done trainings together. I can't count how many times already that I've reached out to Chief Lorenz just to have conversation or to follow up on a message of, hey, did you receive this information? Because we had talked about this before. You said it was important to you. I want to make sure that you got it because I don't want that to be a misstep because this is about Team Fargo. It doesn't matter if it's something as simple as squad cars and getting people to the incidents. Without Ben Dow and his team, we don't get there. We're on foot, and that's 50 square miles on foot is a difficult task, right? Trikes might help us, but that's a long ways to go. So the press brief afterwards really kind of summarized the overall collaboration of everybody working together, and I think that was really important. The school district got to have input. They were a part of that. The emergency services, they were all represented there. And I would be remiss if I didn't even just now thank all of the people that were involved with Chief Lorenz and his team, Chief Pete Nilsson from West Fargo PD. His team was represented. They provided resources. Sheriff Jesse Johnner, he was there in person providing resources and guidance as well. Chief Chris Helmick has also provided resources and was helping. Sheriff Empting and his team always helping. And then the colonel from the Highway Patrol, Danny Haugen, and locally Captain Newen. Having those types of relationships, not just on the law enforcement side, but now reaching into the school district and the business partners and being able to share all this information, work on a strategy together for a positive outcome like that. We're lucky that that situation wasn't as tragic as it absolutely could have been had it been a credible threat or a real threat. But it was a good exercise in resources and showing the collaboration of all of these things together on one specific day on a Friday afternoon where most people were probably thinking that they were going to go home. But here we are, Friday afternoon, and very shortly after, minutes later, it's always interesting to me as well, the switch in roles. So we go from a credible, or what we thought was a credible threat at North High, to minutes later I was meeting with the finance team talking about how we're going to accomplish our next budget cycle and what we're going to do to make things easier for them. That's what collaboration looks like, and to me, that's how we will engage with the city of Fargo. That's how we're going to engage with our community, through community meetings, finding a way for the people to have a voice in that whatever their concern might be, no matter how big or small. But it all boils down to availability as well, and being open-minded and listening when you're in those conversations, versus just thinking that you have all the ideas or that you have all the answers, because I'll be the first one to admit that I don't have all the answers, but I do have a lot of people on speed dial that we can call at any moment in time that we can ask for advice or ask for resources, and that's how we accomplish the mission for the city of Fargo from the Fargo Police Department's perspective. I'll take any questions.
Thank you. If you would like to take a seat, you sure can. And then the committee, now is the time that we are opening for questions to the presentation.
Give you a second to sit down. Thank you for your presentation. That was enlightening, and I appreciate the heavy focus on collaboration, and I thought it was descriptive on how you talked about collaborating sort of across departments and cities and downward. I know from maybe the public's view, collaboration upward with the city leadership and commission is also incredibly important, and I think we've seen challenges maybe with that. How do you view your role as chief collaborating upward as well?
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and something that I probably should have described a little bit better. And that's, well, it starts with conversation. And so already I've been able to meet with multiple commissioners and other folks as well. Not only commissioners, but legislators. The Attorney General stopped by, had a opportunity to speak with him. So again, it starts with conversation and with the intent to listen and understand, because from each one of their perspectives, it's just a little bit different. So what that looks like for me, I've already had this conversation with one of our elected officials, is I would like to see a cadence, in a sense, of a phone call or a coffee, something like that, on a weekly, bi-weekly basis, where we can just discuss what's on their mind. That way you don't ever have to worry about rumor or anything like that. One of my favorite philosophies is talking to people, not about people. So if there's something that we can address, maybe there's some misinformation, I would really like to get to the bottom of that if there's a misunderstanding. And I will also be the first person to admit when I've either dropped the ball or made a mistake. I think ownership is an extremely important part of leadership. I think that's good for people to see as well. I'm an imperfect person. I will make mistakes along the way, but how that works for leading up and communicating up is regular contact. The difficult situations become much easier when you have regular contact with somebody. I'm sure as a leader yourself, you can understand that when you have to go and talk to somebody who you've never spoke to before, it might start off a little rough. We're in a high stakes, high liability game at the City of Fargo, especially with the police department and all of its responsibilities. So making sure that everybody understands where we're coming from, what information we can and can't release, that sometimes becomes difficult, like I said, because it might involve a very intricate case that we can't necessarily share all those details, but it is important for them to understand the context of which we're working through. So to answer your question very simply, it's communication regularly, whatever that may look like. I'm an in-person person. I would rather speak to you face-to-face than over the phone or via email. Much can get lost in those conversations. I think it's important that you see the person sitting in front of you so that as you work through it, they have a good understanding of what you're really trying to say and how we can navigate, whether it's a concern or every once in a while we do get people that say we did a good job. That's fun to listen to as well. Many times people are quick to let us know when we failed or when we've made them feel like we didn't meet the mark for them. But it is also fun to hear the good job that our people do, not only at the police department, but many times we are the tip of the conversation. So when people are relaying that, here was an issue, but, your people responded, it's fun to get to tell them too, like, we weren't the only ones involved with that. We used this resource, whether it was a city resource or another group. But again, to simply answer the question, it starts with communication on a regular basis.
I'll ask another one, if that's all right. Just one more I had written down. Just hearing from the public through this process, obviously it's a unique process we've gone through. I think we all recognize that. And you're the only one here today. And as an internal candidate, there's obviously a lot of positives. You've talked about the turning the me and the we, and the culture, the other players. What do you see your challenges are as coming from an internal candidate that maybe an external candidate could come in with something different? How do you see that internally as a challenge you need to overcome and see it from a higher level or something?
I think I have the luxury of a number of things. I was an outsider. Right? So I got to see the police department from a different light in the beginning. So then I worked under an external chief in the beginning. I learned a lot from watching that. And that's one thing, if you know anything about me, I like to observe. I like to listen. So listening and watching how the community reacted to the external chief and how the department acted and the change that was coming with the external chief. Then I had the luxury of seeing an internal chief brought in after that. I've watched this cycle happen now 2 times, 2 external chiefs, 2 internal chiefs. So at this moment in time, are there challenges? Yes, there are. I do have the luxury, though, of having relationships. So when you don't have a relationship with somebody and you give them feedback, most would call that harassment versus a critique or coaching or mentoring. I think I have a luxury in the fact that I do have relationships with folks inside of the department. Can that make that difficult? Absolutely. I'll be the first one to say that. But we have trained in a number of different things, and I've found some guidance through some of those trainings, and it's really not about necessarily the person. It's about the goal. What is the goal? So the conversation becomes about the goal, not necessarily the person, meaning if you didn't meet the mark, it's not about that Rocky Schneider didn't meet the mark. It's about, here's our goal, here's what we need to do to accomplish that goal. Remembering all the while that each individual person has a different way that they would like to be communicated with. Each individual person has a way that they would like to be congratulated. Officers are fickle because some want to see the recognition, some don't. So apply that times 232, each one of us, that recognition or that coaching, mentoring situation looks differently. So is there an advantage to an external chief versus an internal chief? I think everybody's got a different opinion on that, and that's okay. I think what I bring to the table in this situation is just over 25 years of being inside of the police department in a number of different capacities. Each one brought me different perspective, and I have a really good memory. I remember what it felt like when I was sitting on the other side of the table at this point in time. Does it make some of those decisions easier? No, but at least I can relate to what it felt like being on the other side of that table. Understanding the why becomes really, really important. Understanding why we're making this change. Have I been perfect in explaining all those things or sharing all that information? No, I haven't. I continue to strive to figure out. One of the last survey conversations that we had, there was a department survey and then a citywide survey. So we were talking with some of our people. One of the most difficult questions was, how do we communicate with you? Some want an email, some want it posted here, some want an in-person conversation, some would rather see it, just via a group text message or whatever it is. Again, apply that times 232, 200. Just multiple work groups, multiple cultures inside of those work groups and trying to communicate with everybody. So does an internal chief or an external chief have an advantage in that situation? I think right now you're looking at the right person for this moment in time. And the reason I say that confidently is because I'm committed, I have the competence, and I don't think anybody will question what my motives are when I sit here in front of you. There is no agenda. The agenda is the city of Fargo. We're here to make sure that we have public safety. We're here to make sure that we're good partners with our other department heads, because we are a machine that needs to work together in unison with our business partners, with our community members, whether as individuals or development groups around the city. So I would hate to just truly draw a line in the sand and make a comparison there. I'd make a terrible politician. I'll just tell you about what I can do and what the direction I'd like to go is, versus trying to compare myself to somebody that I don't even know what their agenda or skill set might be.
Any other questions from the committee? Okay, I'll take that as a no. Interim Chief, we will then start the interview questions. We have 10 questions for you this morning in a variety of topics, and the intent is just to expand a little more on your leadership and your experience with the department and vision. So if you are ready, we're going to get started. At any point, if you'd like me to repeat the questions, please feel free to ask. Some of them are a little lengthy. And then in between questions, I'll also take a moment in case the committee does want to ask any follow-up questions. The Fargo Police Department has experienced a significant amount of organizational and operational changes in the past few years. What is your perspective on change versus stability at this time? And how do you bring the department personnel into your vision for the future of the Fargo Police Department?
Change is difficult for everybody, but also staying the same is also difficult for people. So how do we bring change with also providing either stability, depending on what those changes are? Simply put, it's collaboration and communication. So what I mean by that is, just like I was describing in the first part of the presentation, is making sure that no matter which part of the organization, because I'll use their civilian staff as a prime example, many times they feel left behind. That's really unfortunate, because they're not. We wouldn't be able to function without them, ever. The things that we do are supported by civilian staff, other department staff. So working through that, it takes good communication. So when we start discussing whatever the change might be, communication is the most important piece of that. We have to be able to walk them through. Now, what I'm describing is not policing by committee. I'm not saying that everyone gets veto power. At the end of the day, somebody has to make the decision. And I understand that that decision will solely lie on my shoulders. The way I also look at that is we celebrate success as a team, and I take on the failure as an individual. That's my role, and I understand that, and I've accepted that. I would hope to limit the latter, but I know that those days will come. So how do we work through challenge? How do we stay the course while providing stability? Again, conversation, regular conversation. So again, a hot topic. Again, please, department members, I'm sure there's a bunch that are watching right now. Don't panic, because just because we are having conversation about an if-then, then this situation does not mean that it's going to change or that there's going to be abrupt change. We will talk through that first. It's no different than someone setting a course on a ship, setting sail. It takes a team to get the sailboat ready, and then as we go, everybody needs to understand the direction that we're going so that no one's rowing in the wrong direction or drilling holes in the boat, so to speak. So to me, stability is one, being that person, showing stability myself, not knee-jerk reactions to maybe large problem or small problem, being strategic in that conversation, sharing with people thoughts and ideas so that they can have time to comprehend it themselves and think through it. Again, if anyone in this room thinks I'm the only person that's got an idea as to how we can solve, whether it's a staffing issue internally or a structural issue internally, you're wrong. We have 232 problem solvers. They get paid to do that every single day. No matter which part of our department they're in, they're solving people's problems. In fact, the vast majority of the time, even though it's not a police-related problem, they call us anyway. And we've accepted that, and we're really good at that. So managing change and stability boils down to regular conversation, bringing people to the conversation, not just having the conversation about people or numbers, because there are a lot of things that we can just solve with math. Finance is a good example. We can solve a lot of things with math, but again, each one of those numbers represents a person. Change. So if we're talking about change in a shift structure or something like that, you're talking about impacting people's families, kids, daycares, pets, hobbies, all of which are really important to make sure that we've got a balance. But something that would have to be communicated to our staff as we're working through that change is that there is an operational component to that, meaning we are providing a service for people. We need to make sure that we can provide a good service for people. So we might have to change to provide the next level of service that we need in that. So to me, that's what that looks like. Regular communication, being the voice of reason and being that factor of stability myself, emulating that without knee-jerk reaction, and also not being afraid to ask for some counsel from other people, no matter where they're at in the department.
Thank you. Are there any follow-up questions? Question number 2, building relationship with other law enforcement agencies will be important for the next Fargo police chief. How do you plan to build strong working relationships with chiefs and command staff from other agencies? And what approaches would you use to ensure effective collaboration across our metro area?
That started 25 years ago. And what I mean by that is relationships don't get built in a day. Relationships take time, experiencing things together, sharing ideas, sharing concepts. So specifically, how do I answer that question? How do I build relationships with current chiefs and sheriffs, both locally, regionally, and nationally? So locally, that looks like regular conversation, meaning I've already had this conversation with a couple of the chiefs and sheriffs of setting up a time once a month where we get together just to talk, whatever it is. It might be personnel issues. It might just be what's going on that they're seeing from their perspective, either in their jurisdiction or portion. All of which that I spoke to were all very open-minded about that. Regionally, it's staying connected through like the Chiefs of Police Conference, the Sheriff's Association Conference, the League of Cities, keeping us connected in that manner. I hate to keep going back to it, but it really boils down to just plain old communication. You have to schedule some time. You have to schedule time for each other. You need to make time for each other. And in doing that, you'll find that when there are strained relationships, it's much easier to overcome because you have a relationship versus having to approach somebody about something, a difficult topic or a jurisdictional issue when you don't have a relationship with them. The good thing, whether we're talking back to Rocky's question about external, internal, is I've had 25 years of building those relationships with other people. I'm not a surprise to them if they see me calling. They know that it's honest in intent. There isn't anything behind it. I'm very thankful for the relationships that I've built over the last 25 years, considering I can think of a number of major incidents that we've dealt with as a city where the other chiefs and or sheriffs have been involved. And it's knowing them on a first name basis, regular conversation, talking about what's going on, whether it's a traffic issue, critical incidents, the flood fight. There's just so many different situations where relationships become extremely important. So again, just to summarize that, it's regular conversation, time set aside, purposeful conversation, but also just spending some time to decompress, share concerns with somebody from a different perspective, from an outside's perspective, because sometimes you're faced with issues or problems, and because you've been staring at it so long, you just don't see it. Your vision is almost obstructed because you've just been kind of banging your head up against the wall so many times with this issue, and it just takes somebody else with similar experience but not the same, and just a different perspective that can really help guide you. So relationships with the other law enforcement agencies, both locally and regionally. I see the Sheriff's Association, the Police Association, Chiefs of Police as a great sounding board, but I've also had the luxury of attending some national training where I have trusted counsel and other agencies, both large and small. I reach out to them on a pretty regular basis just to have conversation about what we're experiencing here. The luxury in North Dakota is we're usually 5 to 10 years behind on a lot of things, and so they've experienced it prior, so they can just offer some good advice. But then it's difficult because then you have to turn it into how will we use that in Fargo? Because what worked in this city over here that won't necessarily work here in Fargo, but pieces of it might. We have a very unique situation being the largest city in a pretty rural state. So it does take a lot of those relationships with the other chiefs and sheriffs. I think a difficult thing for all of us is to talk about ourselves in a way that almost seems like we're bragging. But I've had the luxury of instructing 1,072 people throughout the state of North Dakota. Some of them have become chiefs and sheriffs, and we still talk on a regular basis. It's because of my time and experience through training, through attending training, through the national conferences or national training such as the FBI National Academy or the Senior Management Institute for Policing. Like through those relationships, it's amazing the information that you can get. And so it all starts with introducing yourself and sometimes just laying on the sword saying, I don't know how to deal with this, or I don't know something, or hey, we've experienced that before. What do you think? So strong relationships internally with our local regional law enforcement partners. I would venture to say that if you called every one of them right at this moment in time, they would say that we have a strong relationship, and that will continue.
Thank you. Are there any follow-up questions? We'll move into question number 3. Chief, can you tell us about your experience managing a large multi-division budget? How do you balance the capital, personnel, operating, and technology needs of the department?
Yes, very difficult. What is, people probably think I'm strange when I say this, but sometimes numbers are fun. So what I find interesting is trying to help everybody understand the gravity of what we're asking for. So as we manage a capital need versus a personnel need, those all come with a very hefty price tag. I'm not saying that every officer or employee would understand, but I think if you ask the vast majority of them, how much does the police department pay for cell phones a month, or how much do we pay for fuel in a month, they now have a much better understanding of what that looks like comparatively than when we are asking for personnel and how much that can cost. It's hard to put that into perspective sometimes because they see the much larger number of the overall city budget. So helping them understand how we fit inside of this. So we have our budget, and then we have this grand scheme of the overall city budget. And it's difficult sometimes because we forget that we're a part of this much larger organization. So I try to share with everybody that while we have these needs, and some are almost non-negotiable because they are absolutely something that we need to do our job, there are other things that we do have to either make sacrifices for or try to figure out how we can accomplish them in a different manner. So helping people understand that purchasing just a simple piece of equipment. I think there's a couple people in the back row over there that have learned that purchasing a piece of equipment isn't so simple. There's a number of processes that you need to go through, and now they have a much better understanding of what that looks like, and now they in turn are passing that on to their people. So it's about education for everybody in the overall scheme. So there are times that, again, we will have to make sacrifices. What was really interesting to me is I was talking to someone over at the Central Garage about the cost of a fire truck in relation to staffing and other things. And it's shocking when you hear the price of a fire truck. It's also shocking when you consider the price of the equipment that goes inside of a squad car. But the message to everybody is simply this. The days of walking around with a tablet and a pen and a paper are over. We need technology. However, the difficulty becomes is you back up 10 years, and I know that our finance director will appreciate this, but you back up 10 years, you could purchase something and you could just own it. And now we could use that, and if we took care of that piece of equipment or whatever it was, we could make it last for 10 years. Now, almost everything we deal with is on a subscription basis. So whether now it's a software program, to include a number of our tangible pieces of equipment are based on subscriptions because they're somehow tied to electronics. So helping our staff understand the level of complexity that takes place on a regular basis. I am not going to say that I understand all the accounting practices that take place at the City of Fargo either. However, I've tried my best to learn, and as I've learned, I've tried my best to share that with those around me so that they have a better understanding of how what we do on a daily basis or on an annual basis, specifically with the budget, how that has an impact on the other operations of the other department heads. So again, it's not just about our department, it's how it fits in with the rest of the City of Fargo and the goals of the City of Fargo. Budgeting and growth is a constant topic of conversation. It's hard, as it's been stated numerous times in finance meetings and whatnot. Last year, for the police department's budget, 92% of that was personnel. So when you consider what's discretionary, you have to take a lot of time to describe what is discretionary. What things do we actually make the decision on to spend money, or what decision can we make to save money so that we can work towards this other goal? Typically, the goal for us is staffing. I don't think any department would argue that they don't need staffing as well, but For us, staffing is a difficult one. So helping everybody understand what the true cost of one person, civilian or sworn, one person has a significant impact on the budget overall. So it's important that they understand that, and then the complexities as to how we make that happen, all while fitting under that umbrella of the city of Fargo.
Travis, I have a follow-up. So I know that as assistant chief, the budget was one of your primary responsibilities, so you're very much in the weeds on the budget, and I appreciate that. You know, we've had many conversations with all the departments about doing more with less. Can you give some examples of situations where, you know, you've swapped out a process, or what kind of thoughts go in your decision as far as, you know, want versus need?
Yeah, that's a fun conversation, to be honest, because it's about strategy. What can we replace with this? If this, then that. So I don't know. Do I let the cat out of the bag here in front of everybody as to some of the ideas that I have, or some of the basic ones that we've tried to institute just in this last budget cycle? But as an example, we have a number of investigator vehicles. So a lot of times when investigators or detectives go out on scene, they have an unmarked vehicle. So a thought that our group has come up with, and what we're trying to do is to consolidate that a little bit by making those also just unmarked police cars, meaning they would have a cage and the ability to transport inside of it. So now, as it relates to replacement, we don't have Ben Dow's team budgeting for a replacement vehicle, the police department adding an expansion vehicle, which now doubles the cost, and then you have to add the equipment, which is double that cost. So by using the replacement value for the vehicle and now just purchasing the equipment, we just cut out two pieces of that. So we aren't doubling down on expenditure just to keep today's operation going. And now that gives us vehicles for multiple uses. So that's just a very simple example of some of the things that we're working on. I do have a number of ideas that I want to run past the finance team and other city leaders, because it's going to look and sound different, but it actually won't cost the city a dime.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. You talked a little bit about staffing, and that's a good transition to the next question. What strategies will you utilize to expand the recruitment and retain sworn and civilian staff?
That's the million-dollar question almost every day. Retention. Retention is training and treating people well enough that they can go anywhere, but making sure that you treat them well enough that they stay. The city has been very good to the police department. Do we still have needs and or wants, depending on your perspective? Absolutely. But as it relates to recruitment and retention, personally, I like to reverse that. I like retention over recruitment. If we can retain the people that we have, and we can keep them up on training and equip them with the right resources, we don't have to do as much recruitment. If we can keep that talent for as long as we can, that institutional knowledge doesn't have to start over. The cost of bringing in a new person is extraordinary, because when you put a price tag on the experience, now the city of Fargo is really, really lucky in the fact that you can take a 3-year officer here at the city of Fargo, and because of the volume of calls for service that they take, they garner a lot of experience very, very quickly. And so we're lucky with that. However, that's like drinking from the fire hose as well for those people. So once we get them past the drinking from the fire hose, it's really important that we retain them. To me, that looks like listening to their concerns, understanding those concerns. Again, we might not always be able to specifically address the concern. It might be an operational need that we can't change, or maybe their frustration is an opportunity, or maybe it's a salary thing. Again, we have to remember our sphere of influence in that. So recognizing which sphere of influence that we have, that we can maybe better the environment to keep those people long-term. I have a couple of different strategies I've been running by people as it relates to the way that we could work with salary so that people can still at least see increments of increase without necessarily increasing a whole bunch of costs. But then you flip that around, we do have 14 people that are retirement eligible today. So if we lost those 14 people today, we'd be in a recruiting pinch because we need to work on making sure that they overlap each other. So when we're discussing our retention and then the recruitment portion, we need to make sure that we have regular discussion with our elected officials and city officials about what that might look like. Do we know for sure that these people are leaving? So can we front load a couple of positions, recognizing when somebody's leaving, they're probably higher end of this pay scale, and starting at the beginning end of the pay scale, maybe those numbers wash, but that takes some math and some figuring, and I can't do that just by myself. That takes the HR team, that takes the finance team, and working through that and coming to a consensus that this is a solution to this particular problem. As it relates to recruitment, the city of Fargo and its employees are its best recruiters. We can also be our worst enemy if we want to take the other side of the coin. So we want to make sure that our employees are engaged and understanding what's taking place so that when they are talking to other people, they can relay the type of atmosphere that we have here, compensation, opportunities, all of those things. We want to make sure that we're bringing in other talented people, and that doesn't just mean for the police department. That means for all other facets of the police, or all other facets of the city of Fargo, but specific to the police department. Recruiting was probably one of my favorite portions of my time at the Fargo Police Department. The reason I say that is it's a lot of fun. You get excited when you get to talk about your job and share with people the opportunities that you've been afforded, or a particular case that you got to see all the way through. It's a lot of fun sharing that with other people, and it always made me excited to come back to work. So I'm cautiously optimistic that as we work through this together, that as people start talking to others about their job, that the excitement comes back, and they see that we really do have a good organization at the police department. We have a lot of great people that are doing amazing things on a day-to-day basis. Unfortunately, a lot of it's in the background, and you don't get to see all that. But there's some amazing people doing amazing things. So sharing that with other people as they're applying, being real with them about what the roles and responsibilities of being a sworn or a civilian inside of the police department. Both are very difficult, complex tasks, and they require a lot of sacrifices that I don't know that everybody truly understands. And so to me, the recruitment and retention portion of all that is just truly walking people what a day in the life of a Fargo police employee looks like is extremely important. But then you have a number of other pieces that we've become the tip of the spear on as it relates to wellness, some of the training initiatives that we've done, to include bringing others in the city along with us on those efforts. Again, back to the collaboration and communication. There are things that we're doing inside of our organization as it relates to wellness that I hope that we can adapt in a number of the other departments, because we've truly seen the benefit. Are we perfect at it? No. But we're definitely making strides in the right direction. And so I think that will help us retain people on the back end, but I also believe that will be a strong draw on the front end. One of the very, very difficult tasks about recruiting right now is if you had to report to work I'm having a difficult time saying this because Commissioner Strand is sitting there, but if you could come to work in a Hawaiian shirt and shorts, or come and wear 35 pounds of gear, which would you choose? That's a tough one. You really have to have a call for service there. Same thing with the fire department and other places. Like, we have a very structured organization, and for people to make that transition from college or a different career into that, is becoming more and more difficult because there's a lot of appealing other career paths out there.
Chief Stefanowicz, if I might just touch on a couple topics relative to retention and recruiting. Anecdotally, when you are bringing people to our community, to your force, or you're trying to keep them, how important or what barriers or obstacles are you seeing with regards to affordable, accessible housing and like childcare? For example, just little big things.
Yeah, I'll really jump on the second one because I mean I'm a parent of three as well. Childcare is expensive, and it's just getting more and more expensive. And we work 24 hours a day. So we've contemplated a number of times as to how we could start our own type of daycare facility for city employees, because we have a number of others that are working 24 hours a day too. And it's very difficult for those that work night shift or an evening shift to work through those things. So typically that takes a really strong relationship. So your partner either making a sacrifice for the family and staying home, but we need to come up with something, because I think that would open up our recruiting pool quite a bit more. Something that we've been able to alleviate is previously when we were sending people out to, on the front end, to Bismarck for the Law Enforcement Academy. Now you had to leave your family for 12 weeks, staying out of the dorms, versus now we're hosting our own academy here, so people can stay in their own home. They don't have to travel back and forth. They don't have to worry about those daycare pieces because they are here in town. So that is a huge benefit. But there's opportunity there, especially with childcare. As it relates to affordable housing, that's not typically something that gets brought up, that they can't find something that fits within the means of the beginning of the pay scale for them. There's certainly, this isn't a great strategy, but there's certainly plenty of overtime available, but we shouldn't have to work people to death to survive. Our people get run through the grinder a lot. There's a lot expected of them 24 hours a day, calling, I see one of our detectives in the back row there, getting called in on weekends when you're expected, had a family event or whatever. There's just so many things that they have to deal with that become really, really complicated if you throw relationships, kids, pets, all kinds of things into. So, but affordable housing as it relates to a recruiting effort, I haven't seen that as much of an issue on that front.
And I'll be quick, Chief. We have 90-some languages spoken in Fargo. So when it comes to retention or recruiting, how do those dots connect with the people you serve, the community, seeing them in who shows up in a uniform, and that going both ways?
Yes. I think if you start looking at more representation of our department, you're going to see a lot of different people from a number of different backgrounds speaking a number of different languages. Now, as you said, 90 different languages. Do we have that represented? No. But there is technology that can help us bridge that gap. Axon has a product that can assist us with that. However, as Susan can relate, this subscription base of that is expensive. But could you imagine, just walk with me through this. So that device, or there's another device that's out there that's a little bit cheaper, but now you're wearing a second device. But imagine me, the almost 50-year-old white male, walking into the Liberian community, and I can speak to them in their language, meaning I can use this device. So it can project up onto the screen what I'm saying, and now it'll translate it into their language, or I can speak through it and it will speak back to them in their language, in both. So they can read it in both English and their language, and then they can hear it in both from me and then through the translation piece. So there's technology out there that can really, really benefit us in that. It's just back to the cost factors of some of those devices.
Assistant Chief, I have one question for you. So as Fargo continues to grow, the population grows, we are starting to become more on par with other cities and suburbs in the Midwest that they have high call volumes and their officer ratios are getting to be similar to ours. So as we grow and our department grows, a lot of those other major cities have higher pay, benefits, better equipment. So specifically, what's your plan for being able to retain people and get people to come to Fargo instead of choosing one of those other departments that are having similar workloads but having those different benefits? But then in conjunction with that, what's your plan for being able to keep morale up when some of those things aren't going to be attainable?
Right. So some of those things are very frustrating, right? We can look here locally at our neighbor cities, and their call volume is a lot less, and their pay might be comparable or even better. So what would retain? What would keep somebody here? And that is the question, if you remember from our survey conversation, is when we can't change what we're paid, we have to remember what can we control. So what are those things? Are those things a shift model? Like right now, something that's important to people, I'm sure is important to you, is weekends. Getting a weekend off once in a while, that's important. Does that cost us anything? Well, I don't know. Talk about call volume, that might cost us something. So we might have to adjust a shift structure to deal with call volume. So how do we remain competitive with the other organizations when it relates to pay? The unfortunate part is we don't get to control that necessarily. We can provide information, but at the end of the day, we have a budget that we have to fall in line with, and we are one piece of a much larger organization. Very, very complicated. So we have to look at what can we do internally? What things can we offer? I would challenge you today to go look at some of the facilities that are provided to the other organizations versus our facility, our gym, our wellness programming, what's provided at the other organizations. Very different. Again, maybe to them, they have something that they feel is better than ours. We just have to stay in tune with people like you, with people in different areas of the organization to find out what keeps them coming back to work every day. What keeps me coming back, I'm sure, is very different than what keeps you coming back, and that's okay. We just have to recognize those perspectives, and if we can find a theme in there, such as, I know for a lot of people at our organization, having the gym availability 24 hours a day and that they don't have to pay for it is a huge deal. So what do we keep doing? We keep adding to the gym. I don't know if I should say this or not, but I'm going to. The city hasn't funded the majority of that gym. You're looking who has. You're looking at who has. Because I recognize that that's important. It's a really, really important piece, not only just for the morale portion, but again, it's filling a need. So now, go away from compensation. What else could be important? Is it the equipment? Again, the city of Fargo does a really good job at equipping us with what we need. Are there wants? Absolutely. We just have to then prioritize because we are stuck inside of a limited budget. And what's difficult, as I'm sure you can understand, is when you have 232 different ideas as to what's important, finding the right theme to match. So if that equipment is the new whiz bang, whatever it is, we have to decide what we are willing to possibly sacrifice as it relates to get that, or can we find an alternative method to pay for it, such as the Police Foundation. The Police Foundation has been just a phenomenal resource for us to assist us with some of the projects as it relates specifically to what you need or want. So I don't feel like the foundation should have to fund us per se, but they do assist us with a lot of those other things, whether it's wellness programming, getting people to conferences, or Last Canine. They've been able to assist us to make sure that we remain competitive in those things. But it would be, I don't have the only idea as it relates to what specifically we can do, but we just have to remember what we can influence and what we can't. So if we can control the budget, hey, we've got a number of things that we can get done tomorrow, but we don't have control over the overall budget. So we just have to focus on the things that we can control, most of which are culture related, or things that we can do to, dare I say, have a little fun while we're at work. The family events. I think our wellness team has done a fantastic job at trying to bring people back. But I was recently having a conversation with Commissioner Strand about like events like that, where recognition events, things of that nature. It's difficult because when you are done with work, where do you want to go? Home, to your kids, right? To your wife. I want that for you too. And if we're hosting events in the evening or whatever, it's difficult for you to now come if you're not bringing your family. So we're trying to be more family focused so that we can have that time together. But at the same time, I too value that time at home and understand why some of those events don't go off quite as we expect. But we're trying. We're trying our best to make sure that we've got those things to keep people when we can't necessarily influence the compensation package or the latest piece of equipment, because the luxury that some of the other organizations have is size. You back up 20 years and we were half of the size that we are now. It was much easier to turn and start with this new thing or process or policy. Today, that's like turning a cruise ship. It takes a little bit of time and it takes planning. So if we want said new thing, we might have to plan that in increments over the next 3 years. Doesn't mean that we can't do it. It means it's possible. It's just going to take us some time to get there. And we have to figure that out with a strategy.
Okay, we will move on to the next question. We are staying on the staff topic here. Tell us about your experience managing, leading, and engaging civilian staff, and how do you unify civilian and sworn staff in such a large department?
Absolutely. And as I stated earlier, it's unfortunate, but many times our civilian staff does feel left behind because I can think of a number of situations in the last couple of years specifically related to compensation, and it's extremely frustrating. The state of North Dakota offers a grant for all sworn employees. So the sworn employees get a bonus, let's call it, because it's scaled by years of service, whether that's a few $100s to a few $1,000s. In the big scheme of things, not a huge impact, but at the same time, every little bit helps, especially with inflation and things of that nature. It's really unfortunate that we aren't able to include our civilian staff on things like that. However, that was a grant. We don't have any control over that. Specifically, I would say I'm honored to have been one of the supervisors who's actually supervised the civilian group in our records group and overseeing our quartermaster and the evidence management, our evidence manager in tech. It's very interesting listening to their concerns. It's very interesting to me hearing their perspective. It's easy to fall into the background because of the work that they do. It's behind the scenes a lot of the time. But one of my favorite messages that I get on an almost monthly basis is our records manager forwards me all the things that they discussed at some of their team meetings. The amount of work that they do is amazing. I wish that there were more ways that we could recognize them. But similar to Landon's question about, when compensation or things of that nature isn't available, what do we do? One of the civilian employees came to me, gosh, this had been 6 or 7 years ago, and was talking about how they wanted to put some information together about compensation and their job description. And this project had fallen flat on its face for I can't count how many years. And I'm honored to say that I was the first person who grabbed that and sat with that group of people and put together an entire presentation and a job description working with the HR team and brought that forward. And we were able to move the needle, although very little, but we were able to move the needle for them in that circumstance. So I'm really proud to say that, but I wish we could do that more often. However, also recognizing that the other component here is that fitting inside of the city of Fargo as an overall organization. Things that I think that we could do to better recognize our civilian employees is bringing them into more of the conversations. So over the last probably year and a half or 2 years, I would say, you see more of our civilian staff, attending briefing. You see more of our civilian staff represented in our executive meeting on every Tuesday. And that's important. Sometimes people in the room don't have much to say, and there's other times where there's a really important topic that comes up. And I view it as there really shouldn't be a difference. They're a part of our organization. They're a part of our team. And I wish I could wave a magic wand to do some other things that was certainly advantageous for that group of people. But similarly to Landon, we just have to find creative ways to keep them involved, to make sure that they feel understood and heard, and that we understand their position in the department. Because an officer, as they are out dealing with these critical incidents, they go out there, they deal with it, and now they come back, they write the report, they do these log evidence, whatever the case may be. Then our record staff make it presentable. They do a great job. Same with our evidence team and our quartermaster. They are the ones behind the scenes doing all of these supporting roles so that we can go out and do our job. And it means a lot. It means it means more than we can express to them. But I think sometimes a simple thank you and recognizing them for the work that they do, such as the awards of like Civilian of the Year, being included in some of those things, I think is really, really important. And I would like to hear if they have other ideas as to things that we could do to support them and make them feel like they're valued, because you can't put a price tag on that group of people. They are fantastic, and without them, the machine wouldn't work.
Thank you. Okay. How do you intend to build on the wellness initiatives of the Fargo Police Department? And tell us about your role in building the department's wellness program and how you include both sworn and civilian staff.
Yeah, that's an important topic, and also one of my favorite strategies to discuss. The wellness initiative got started, and it was really rocky and bumpy, because we started with what's called the Montana Physical Abilities Test, the MPAT. And we were trying to implement it, and we were calling it a wellness program, which is almost laughable when I think about it now. But the goal was just to get people moving. It was to get people exercising, knowing that if you're of sound body, you're typically of sound mind. Those two things work together. Typically, law enforcement officers don't have a long lifespan. It's shortened by cardiac problems, diabetes, back problems. So the goal was to get people moving. We encountered some resistance as we started, as of course typical with change, but we encountered some resistance with the initial rollout of that, and so it slowly gained traction. But the other part of the wellness portion of it, as it relates to the physical side, was we also didn't really have much of a facility for people to work out in. So like trying to grow those two things at the same time. Well, a philosophy that I've always had is happy, healthy, and wealthy. So happy being the state of mind, healthy state of mind and body, and wealthy not just monetarily, but in spirit and in health. So combining all of those things, realized we were building a table with only one leg on it, working on just the physical fitness portion. So it became more about how do we develop mental health inside of our organization, recognizing immediately we would have resistance, because as it relates to mental health, many times police department employees, it's not a topic they want to talk about, nor do they want to ask for help. So how do we institute that? So working with some of our, what I would consider mental health experts internally, we started to devise a plan as to how we could get people in for mental health check-ins on an annual basis so that we could reduce the stigma of just going and talking to somebody. What's interesting is we, over the course of this last year or so, we changed some providers. And before, people were kind of being drugged to the provider. And now that we were going to change providers, now they're had to be drugged to go to somebody else kind of thing, because they started building relationships. And in the end, what a cool thing to have happen. What a cool problem to have. The fact that we actually had people that were building relationships with mental health providers where they feel that they can go and dump their bucket, whatever that is. Now having a grant that was written by one of our employees, we were able to get a wellness coordinator which is another fantastic piece of all this. Again, we're still growing as it relates to our wellness initiative, but you consider the resources that she's able to tap into, and I'll use myself as an example. Going through a lot this last 6 months with family and now this, in reaching out to her, I told her I was having kind of an issue getting in to just talk to somebody. She made a phone call, and the next day I was in. And I was able to speak to somebody. We set up a cadence, and man, just being able to empty my bucket with somebody that I just knew I could just share everything that was going on, what I was thinking, and instead of it being like, ooh, wow, that's scary, it was a safe space. It was a place where I could just share the information. I didn't feel like I was being judged. And now I'd be happy to share that with, well, I guess I just did, everybody that opportunity wouldn't have been available for me had it not been for the wellness program. The reason I say that is after I called and was told that it would be 2-3 weeks before I could get in, I wasn't going to call again. I don't know if I'd have worked through it myself. I don't know if somebody internally had had a conversation there and been able to dump my bucket, but because of having that resource available, I don't know that everybody recognizes the true impact that they're having, because not everybody's going to talk about their journey and what that looks like for them. You consider the amount of trauma that officers and our civilian employees see and hear and write, type, witness through video on a daily basis. The average person might see 1 or 2 of those events in their lifetime, and they're experiencing this on a daily basis. So there's no doubt that they're carrying a lot around, and they do need a safe space to empty that bucket out in. So if it wasn't for the wellness program that we have currently, I think we would see a retention problem. I think if we could take our current program and if we could back up 10, 15 years, I could start probably going down a laundry list of names of people I think we would still have here, because we'd have been able to engage with them sooner, help them get the resource that they needed at that time, whether that's, to the furthest end of that scale with addiction or whatever that issue might have been, to the smallest just, day-to-day relationship or whatever that might have been. No matter what level of difficulty they were experiencing, to have that resource available, I think would have saved us quite a large number of officers over a period of time. So what does that look like for us going forward? I don't know that everybody is ready for it, but we need to keep growing that program in some way, shape, or form. To me, it's finding additional civilian resources so that we can keep officers doing sworn things, and our civilian folks working on the support role of that, because each one of those roles is extremely important, but we just need to keep growing with that, because each year we're going to be evolving. Each year there's different issues that come up. And man, you think about an organization of our size and the life issues that people have dealt with, let alone the work issues that they're dealing with. So we need to make sure that we've got our finger on that pulse. And I'm actually really honored to say that we were able to bring the fire department along with us in this journey as well, in reaching out to them. And so they were able to institute a very similar program. They don't have the coordinator that we do, but I hope that someday as a city we're able to find an overall citywide coordinator that can also then service all the departments. So I think we're going to be a model for a lot of organizations, not just as a police department, but as a city, as we continue to grow that program.
Thank you. Any follow-up questions? Okay, we'll move on to the next one. As the police chief, you will lead a command staff that is responsible for the oversight of divisions of the Fargo Police Department. How do you engage the command staff to lead in a way that supports your overall strategy while keeping them engaged, inspired, and well-informed?
That's the fun part about being a leader is figuring out how to engage a number of different people. But a couple of terms come to mind when you speak about that. There are leaders where you have to run every decision through them. to get an answer, to get an outcome. That really slows things down. That frustrates people, not only because of it slowing it down, but a simple philosophy is we hire good people, get out of their way. However, we have to provide guidance. So the military uses a term called decentralized command. What that means is that you empower your line level leaders and mid-level leaders to make decisions. To me, success in this realm looks like our line level leaders, no matter where they're at in the department, making decisions and making good decisions without anybody else in the room. The reason I say that is because they've been provided the proper guidance. They've been provided the proper training. So think of it almost as another military term of like the commander's intent. So as the leader or as the police chief, you're providing the commander's intent. Here's the guide. Here's our goal. Here's what we're trying to accomplish. And as long as we're staying within those guidelines, you make the decision. Recognizing that as the police chief and or the leader in this situation, that I'll wear the mistake, they get the success. And that's part of that. So we have to spend time getting to know them, building trust. Takes years to build trust, seconds to break it, but making sure that you're speaking their language too. In our organization right now, we currently have 3 captains. I think I have different conversations with each of the captains. However, the message is still the same. I speak to them differently because each one responds differently to different things, different goals, different ideas. However, at the end of the day, when we're in the room, we're still focused on the same goal. We just might be getting at it from different angles. My role in that is to provide the guidance to make sure that we are staying within the goals of the city, legal ramifications, making sure that we're fully prepared for whatever that is, recognizing, again, each one of those has an individual role or in that situation, a division of people. But again, simply put, it's not their problem, meaning it's not the captain of neighborhood services issue. It's not the captain of professional standards issue or the captain of CAD's issue. It's our issue. It's our issue to solve. So many times that looks like providing guidance, counsel, or asking the next question. One of our previous chiefs, that was something that I really took away from him. Was that a lot of times as people are working through things, they're set. You know, they've got their idea, they've got their mind kind of made up as to this is the path that I want to do, and that's great. We want them to come to the table with a solution, not just all the problems. However, many times it just requires a few more questions. So by listening with the intent to understand, asking a few more questions about what it is that we're talking about, they typically have a really good idea. And that's what we're looking for. So as the leader, or as possibly the next police chief in this situation, providing the guidance, providing proper training for people, sharing with them the goal, making sure that we are aligned. It doesn't mean we have to think the same. In fact, I would rather the opposite, which is what I appreciate about the vast majority of our supervisory group. While we may end up at the same goal, we look at the problem differently, and that's really important. Because as you think about that, there are so many complex problems that we're trying to deal with, and I might think I have an answer, but as I listen to another group of people or a conversation, there's another one, and I'm laughing in my mind because I'm thinking about a very difficult task that we took on a few years back. Those that have dealt with me know that I deal in spreadsheets a lot. So we were trying to devise this system, and I was trying to build it in a spreadsheet. And an officer came in and saw what I was doing. He knew that I had been working on it for at least a week. And he's like, looks at it and he goes, let me show you something. I can show you how to do something else, not in Excel, but I can show you how to do something else. I can build it in probably an hour, and I'll do everything that you're trying to accomplish there. Now, I think most people would have been very, very frustrated by that you just spent a week's worth of time trying to build something, and somebody else just walked in the room and was like, no, we need to change direction. All I did was stood up and followed him down to his office and sat down and watched what he did. And I was like, perfect. This is awesome. I could have been embarrassed. I could have been a number of things, but actually telling the story right now, it gives me goosebumps because it was exciting to see that we had a good enough relationship that he felt like he could walk in and share we were going in the wrong direction. I'd like to think that that also bodes well for me in admitting or acknowledging the fact that we were going in the wrong direction. And by his guidance, now we were going back in the right direction, saved us a boatload of time. We were under huge time constraints. People weren't allowed to be at work at the time. There was a whole host of things or obstacles in that situation that we were just able to overcome just because of the relationship over time built with people, providing guidance of, I'm not always going to be the smartest person in the room. Your ideas are valid. Again, come in with perspective. We'll talk through it, and sometimes the plan might end up on a napkin and turn into something official very, very quickly. And other times we might deliberate for many, many months trying to figure out how to solve that issue. But recognizing as the police chief or as a leader, providing guidance, setting up the guardrails, but also empowering people to make decisions on their own is extremely powerful. Because when they feel like they can do that, that's what success looks like, when they know that they can make a decision. And even if it doesn't necessarily fall within the parameters, that we can have a discussion about that. We can talk about the why we wanted to go the other direction, or why this didn't work out the way that we want, and then we both learn. And I'll be the first one to admit when I've made mistakes in those situations.
Thank you. Okay. The next question is about engagement. What methods have you previously used to measure employee engagement and satisfaction? And what strategies do you believe are most effective to maintain employee engagement, overall satisfaction, and positivity within the police department?
Yeah, let's start with one end of the spectrum. My least favorite way of that type of engagement is, and I have a hard time because I don't want to look at the HR director when I say this, but the survey. Survey is my least favorite. And the reason I say that is because I like the follow-up conversation. I like the follow-up questions. I like being able to follow up a little bit more. A survey does help us gather a lot of information, hopefully quickly, so that we can address some needs or whatever that might be. But to me, the engagement portion looks like conversation. What's difficult sometimes in our work environment is if you get a group of people together, you get hot and cold almost immediately. You get a group that they will flood you with information, and you won't be able to take notes fast enough because they'll have a bunch of ideas, a bunch of solutions, and a bunch of problems all at one time. And then you'll go into the next group of the same size, and you won't get one person to speak. However, all you need to do is then stand in the hallway for the after conversation. So then you get the other details that weren't brought up in that conversation. So what engagement looks like to me is some variation of both of those things. There's a team that's been working on career development. I feel like that's a great way to discuss a lot of things in the department, where they're working with their immediate supervisors about what they need specifically for their work group, what they need for their career development. And there's other pieces in there, kind of a free form in a sense, to discuss whatever needs or wants that they may have. So for me specifically, how do I fit into that? It's both. It's making sure that we're asking the right questions, whether that's in a survey or in-person conversation. But if I had my druthers, the unfortunate part is I would pick probably the one-on-one conversation. Not probably, I would pick the one-on-one conversation, which is probably the slowest. And that's the hardest part, is I find myself in conversations with people listening, and the conversation could be any length of time. But now you're trying to do that for 232 other people. And that takes time. Time is extremely valuable at the police department. And it's hard to come by. We're already working long hours trying to deal with that volume of calls for service, as the officer stated. So it becomes difficult. And then you also have to meet people where they're at, meaning we have people on night shift that work late in the evening. It made me think of one of our records personnel that regularly works by herself in the evening time. I think I scared her the other evening when I was going through trying to get some stuff done. But engaging people where they're at, I think, is extremely important. Finding a way to recognize what's going on in their personal lives as well. So it's not just about work. It's okay to check in on people and ask them how things are going. Typically, that starts off with small talk, but then if you hang around long enough, you typically get to some problems, whether that's on a personal level or professional level. So if I could choose and I could have my way, I would build a schedule that I could get a one-on-one visit with people on a very regular basis. The difficulty is, even if you just did that once a day, I'd almost encompass the entire year with the amount of employees we have. So it's got to be a variation of both. It's got to be group discussion, and we have to create an environment where people feel like they can speak up in the group environment. Sometimes it's not just about the person who's standing at the front of the room, however. It's about the work group that they're in. So some feel very comfortable speaking in front of their work group, and others, we like to give each other a hard time as well. So sometimes people don't necessarily feel comfortable about speaking up with others in their work group. So finding that variation of both of those things, engaging in conversation, using that career development as it relates to the things that they need focus on for their next steps, whatever that might be, whether they're a high growth or low growth need type person. Are they happy doing what they're doing today? Do they need other things? Whatever that may look like. What's been surprising to me, it shouldn't have been, but what's been surprising to me is the one-on-one conversations that I've had, the amount of hard times that people are experiencing in their personal lives with significant others, whether it's a loss of job or medical issues, things of that nature, kids, health problems. It's really unfortunate, but I'd like to think that because of the conversations, most of them feel like they're valued and that we truly will try to do whatever we can as an organization to help them out, whether that's through like our Blue Days of Giving and or other things that we've done, or maybe it's something that we can just work with them on a scheduling thing so that they can get people to doctor's appointments or whatever they need. But back to the task at hand, what does that engagement look like for me? It's finding a way to get that delicate balance between the large groups and the one-on-one conversation so that everybody gets an opportunity to say their portion. What's difficult sometimes, though, is if I walked through and I sat down with an officer and had a conversation, others might feel like, okay, well, why is he talking to this person and not me? And it just might have been an opportunity, a conversation of opportunity, not necessarily something scheduled. It's a delicate balance of trying to find what works for people and what doesn't, and then what works for each work group and what doesn't. So it is difficult and it is a delicate balance, but to me that looks like regular conversation, one-on-one, and or in those group settings.
Okay, thank you. I promise we're almost to the end. There are 2 questions left. As Fargo Police Chief, what indicators will he use to measure success for the police department? And how will you build these indicators into a strategic plan and communicate the outcomes to all the stakeholders?
Right. So the quick way to success, or at least the quick version of success to me, looks like, again, our employees making decisions that they feel comfortable with, that they know that they're legally sound with, leadership decisions about critical incidents, making decisions at their level without having to ask permission multiple times through the chain of command, slowing things down. That's what success looks like to me as it relates to decision making. As far as a strategic plan, you have to know what the issues are to have a strategic plan. So we have to find those issues. However, sometimes it is difficult in our world to quantify things. So to put a percentage on something, if crime rate drops, well, is the perception that crime is really down, or is that just a number? So in a strategic plan, that is a number that we can use to quantify something. But then there's so many other things that we do that are difficult to quantify. So making sure that we have something in there that we can use as a measure of success. And to me, the measure of success will be the feedback that we get from our community members, our elected officials, as to what they're hearing from their work groups. The thing that we regularly have to be careful about as it relates to strategic plans, and then the information that we get back, is a phrase that I regularly hear is, I've been hearing, or a group of people came and told me. We have, 140,000 people in the city of Fargo, and 4 or 5 people might not be a great representation of the group of 140,000. So making sure that there's a checks and balances built in there. If you were to ask my group of people about an issue, that might be a very different perspective than this much larger group over here. So developing that strategic plan so that it reaches across all of those either groups, communities, and or internally, because success looks a little different in the criminal investigations divisions versus neighborhood services. So the strategic plan has to be all across the board, one citywide. How do we address whatever the issue is specifically? Then the next steps would be, okay, now internally, what are the measures of success for criminal investigations division? Are we talking about case clearance rates? Are we talking about arrest rates? Again, sometimes, let's just use traffic as an example. If a goal is to reduce dangerous driving behavior, now people quickly start thinking about quotas because, okay, now we need to issue 20 cites an officer to do X, Y, and Z. Well, is that a good measure of success just because people wrote 20 citations? I would argue that no, that's not a good measure of success. So it would be difficult to put numbers to a lot of those things, but success to me looks like the feedback that we're getting from the community members. So you have to keep your finger on that pulse, meaning you still have to be represented in the community groups. So community meetings, other like the Downtown Community Partnership, that group, checking in with them, checking in with the different associations throughout the city, the organizations, the Lions Club, whatever one of those formats that we can find ourselves into, and walking through, okay, here's our strategy. The strategy is dangerous driving behavior. Now, these are the things that what are we going to do? Okay, how do we measure success? Is it that we had a lower crash rate this year? Is it that we had lower deaths? Is it that we had lower complaints? All of those are certainly factors, but just because we had fewer complaints doesn't mean that we didn't have more crashes. So did we solve the issue? So certainly a complex discussion as it relates to the decisions in the strategic plan, but to me, success looks like the feedback that we're getting through the community, through the name escapes me of the group that we're working with that surveys the community in a number of different facets of our performance. So using those metrics as well would be an important part of that strategic plan.
Any additional questions? Okay. Once again, you have done a really nice job leading to the transition of the last question, which is about crime prevention. How would you, as police chief, proactively work to prevent crime, maintain public order, and strengthen community trust before situations escalate to require police intervention? Additionally, how would you tailor your approach to address the unique needs and concerns of different neighborhoods in our community?
Right. So to me, prevention looks like visibility, because the more visible our folks are, the more we increase our ability to be seen. And I know that's really stating the same thing, but just being seen can also have a large impact, both in perception and in just the way that people feel. So marked police vehicles. While it is great to have unmarked vehicles that maybe catch a speeder, let's say we had marked vehicles out there and nobody was speeding. Wouldn't that also be the real goal, is just that everybody's driving behavior was the way that it was supposed to be, without necessarily having to catch everybody? Now, the flip side of that is take our downtown area. Visibility is extremely important there. People need to see our folks, whether that's the vehicle, whether that's them walking in uniform, which you see on a regular basis, sometimes difficult because of the weather. I don't think most of us like to really take a long stroll when it's 20, 30 below and snowing. But our officers are out there trying to do a number of different things to remain visible. So prevention to me looks like visibility, and not just at the line level. Prevention to me is an organizational goal, and an organizational, as in our problem, not just my problem, it's our problem. So I'll use last Friday as an example too, of where we went walking downtown. Again, just the ability to talk to people, figure out what their issue is specifically so that we can work on the prevention side, because if one of their issues is dangerous driving behavior, again, walking around the downtown probably isn't doing anything about the dangerous driving behavior and or prevention of dangerous driving. So now we're talking about those specific community groups that you were discussing. So making sure that they understand what we are doing as it relates to prevention, because they might have an idea that we might like to use, and or the opposite. They don't understand what we are currently doing to prevent said behavior or make a reduction in whatever that issue might be. So the collaboration between multiple agencies, collaboration between our elected officials, collaboration with those community groups to show that prevention is a lot of things. It's education. So getting out with the community groups and sharing with them not only statistics, but some of those methods without giving away all the secrets, but certainly sharing with them some of the methods that we are using. And if we find that those methods aren't working, we have to adapt. We have to now improvise. We have to come up with other creative strategies. One of probably the most difficult parts of prevention and visibility is that it takes a large number of people. When you're talking about 50 square miles, and then you consider the amount of different calls for service. So if an officer or a detective is going into a specific neighborhood to follow up on an issue, now another neighborhood might not feel like they're represented. So what I would like to show the community is some of that data. Again, data-driven, but understanding that there's a feeling behind those facts. So data might show this, but the feeling is still the opposite. Or now in a South Fargo neighborhood, they might feel underrepresented because we haven't been down in their neighborhood because we're working on XYZ problem. So again, just sharing with them the crime prevention methods. It was a little bit simpler previously when we were able to dedicate a specific person to a lot of that messaging, but I think with our current communications team and their creativity, social media, and a number of different other ways through media, social media, and then our community events, we can share a lot of that information and those strategies and make sure that they understand what we're doing and why. Because again, sometimes it's just a misunderstanding or a misperception. Getting a better understanding then helps them as they work through that, not just for them, but let's face it, each one of us has a group of people that we talk to when we're away from work. So now that information starts to slowly trickle through the other groups. So crime prevention to me looks like communication, sharing information, data-driven. Our website is also a good place for a lot of that information to take place so that people understand what the reporting mechanisms look like, what the recording side of those mechanisms look like. And then also, I'm not afraid to steal somebody's idea. So if we go into a community group and they have a great idea of something that we either haven't thought of or just haven't done in a really long time, because it's been my experience that some of the crime preventions methods might have worked 15 years ago, and it's been something that just nobody has tried in a while, and a community member will say something like, do you remember when we had this? And you kind of forget because you're faced with other issues along the way, and one issue might take priority over the other. So My role in crime prevention is just community awareness, sharing with everybody what that information is, what those strategies are, making sure that our elected officials are aware of what those strategies are so that they can share that with their constituents as well, and really overall just communicating probably in a much more intentional, deliberate way.
Thank you. That was the last question that we had. I'm going to open up for the committee to see if you guys have any questions.
Chief, I want to thank you for, if the public didn't know you, they know you now. This is almost like a conversation with the chief. You exposed a lot of things about the department, talked a lot about the department. I think it's clear to all us members, maybe your strategy, where you want to go. It's collaborative, it's conversationalist, it's working with your team, which I very much appreciate. I anticipate we'll see some changes over the next 3 to 6 months that'll happen, but it seems to me that you're going to have the buy-in from your department, so it's not something that's a surprise. So I want to thank you for being very frank today and having, really in my mind, a conversation with the community. Everybody should have an idea of what you're about and what you're planning on doing. And I'm looking forward to it because I think you're going to listen, and that's a critical, important part of being a leader. And I think your idea of it's not me, it's we, of how we do go forward is very important. So thank you very much for this morning. I know you have a lot. You got to do the budget. You're doing all sorts of crazy things right now. But if this role, as this role goes forward, now you really will have the authority to do the things you want to do. And I think that's important. So thank you for this morning, and I'm very glad you're well prepped for it. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Can I ask one question, sir? I appreciated that your talk about collaboration and understanding the police are often the most visible, but you're one part of a machine. And I compliment the sergeant next to me. We did a lot of work on engaging with the homeless outreach and the harm reduction team. And we've also seen that cohesiveness maybe not quite as there as you go up as it was on the street level, on the ground level. And I know there's a lot of other cities around the country working with the same challenges we are and trying different things. Some work, some not. But I know they're a valuable part of our downtown efforts and across the whole city, the homeless outreach team, the HEART team. And just want to put that out there that I hope you have a strategy on how you engage other departments and other things like the harm reduction team to help you and your strategy.
Certainly understand that. And that's again, pick your issue. It is truly collaboration and making sure that everybody understands their role inside of that. We whether we want to say it or not, unfortunately are the face of many of those issues because we are the initial response, but it'll take us working together to get the solution because, again, mental health, addiction, homelessness, I mean, those are all very, very difficult, complex issues that aren't just going to be solved at the police department level.
Chief, do you have any questions for the committee?
No, I think I've used more words in the last 2.5 hours than I have in probably, I don't know, a month.
Okay.
We'll have just a brief selection committee discussion and be in touch too. But thank you so much for all the time today. Well, thanks everybody for being a part of the process today. And so we'll just provide a brief summary of where we ended up with all of our comments. And thanks for the good follow-up questions today too. That was really, really helpful. So just want to report that it was a unanimous recommendation to me that we move forward with the appointment of Chief Stefanowicz. So that will be presented to the City Commission next Monday on May 11th. And so that'll be on the regular agenda. We'll do just a brief cover memo and we'll summarize the conversation. And I'll make sure that we thank all of you too. I'll publicly say that at the City Commission meeting that we're just very appreciative of the selection committee and all of your efforts, and great questions, too. I'll make sure to thank the captains group and the lieutenants group. We didn't have the ability to get every last question in there that was suggested, but tried to take and paraphrase and meld together some that made some real good sense on things like managing change, managing your kind of culture, managing how you come in as a new chief, how you build that credibility with the department. So really grateful for a lot of those great inputs and ideas. So we could only really get to about 10, and you could hear even in his very thorough responses today, we absolutely could have added 5 more, and I'm sure we would probably still be hearing from him, because he's got a lot of great thoughts, a lot of good ideas, about how to move forward. So, but great to see the unanimous support for the interim chief, and that will be the recommendation that will be presented to commission. So, any other feedback points from the group before we would close it up? I, again, just really appreciate your time. I know it's valuable.
And again, thank you as a committee for being part of this. It's been very helpful. I think the public has to know we went through all the candidates we could go through, and this is the one that finally came to the top. I do thank everybody for the questions. I think we really got a thorough idea of what he wants to do. So great job, great work, and appreciate your time.
And I should just ask, any other comments about the candidate, about next steps, things that you'd like us to visit about too? We'll go visit with Mr. Stefanowicz upstairs and obviously make him aware of what we'll be doing on Monday, but I certainly want to include any other comments that you have.
I didn't anticipate that a chief of police would talk about what a priority it is to have fun at work and to enjoy your work and to make it, that just came through. That's really critically important, that people love what they do and that they have fun when they're going to work. And that's really hard work. So I over and over, I'm making notes to myself of his references to, well, that's really fun, or that could be fun, or that's the most enjoyable part of my job. What a treat to see that culture permeate down to the entire department, to let's have fun while we're doing our hard work. Just a notation.
I'm going to try to say this carefully because I kind of mentioned it in our original meeting that we had. I think no matter what, if we had 40 applicants for this position, Stefanowicz would have been the top candidate across the board. I think we need to, in the future, err on the side of caution. And I know we talked about the commission meeting where we had officers coming in and having this is what the department unanimously believes in, and this is the guy we want, which is true for a vast majority of people, myself included. However, there were still quite a few people that were disappointed in the amount of candidates that put in, and I think that interaction had a large portion to do. And as Rocky had said, the fact that we just have armed officers coming and saying, this is what we want, give us what we want, I think there should probably be some language or something pushed forward in the future of we should be able to voice our opinion as officers of who we'd like, but probably in a more appropriate manner, because I think that crunched our time frame down and definitely cut down on the candidates we had. Across the board, I think Stefanowicz is the right guy, and I fully support him, but just kind of wanted to voice that on behalf of a lot of other officers.
I think that kind of comes down to what Stefanowicz talked about, is communication. I think that the officers may have seen something different than actually what happened in that situation. And I know I've talked to different supervisors about why that happened, how it happened, who was behind it, who supported it, who didn't. And I think that that's important to understand, that everything that you may think was the reason behind that probably wasn't correct, right? And so I think that's one thing that I really value about Stefanowicz, is he is very vigilant about making sure that everybody has all the information, because that is going to be the topic that I believe gets talked about around the world. I specifically didn't wear my uniform today because of what Rocky said. And then he said, well, you should have wore it because you're in a city capacity. And I said, I can't win with you, Rocky. So, but I don't disagree with Landon's comment. I would say that this department is a very phenomenal department to work for, and people should be jumping at the opportunity to do so. And I think that the process that is in place is very important. Like I talked about in our committee meeting, I don't think, were you there? Yeah, you were there. It's very important for people that come from different cities to see what the city's about, because they may come in here and hear what he has to say or hear what a commissioner has to say or an employee and go, there's no way I'm ripping that scab off, right? Or there's no way I'm going to do that. And so I agree with that this is probably the outcome we would have had anyway, but I think something does need to be put into place so that doesn't happen again. I mean, because I think, in my sole opinion, there was a lot of meddling in different places from different areas that shouldn't have been allowed to happen. That's just how I look at it. So it wasn't even fair for Travis to be put in a position like this, specifically where you are preparing for the interview of possibly your life, your entire life, and it got changed to 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. I can't imagine going through that. I wouldn't have slept last night. So for him to perform the way he did, I think, is a true testament to what kind of a leader he is. That you don't come up with overnight. That's how he's lived his life and done his career here. So for that, I commend him.
Maybe just add a little bit, because we did have a unanimous this recommendation here, but just for some deliberation, I've dealt with the city now for over 20 years, and almost every department had clashes or big issues, big challenges to talk through, and I haven't seen a leader like that come forward that's both, serious and driven, but also showed a lot of vulnerability and just willingness to have those conversations without, it wasn't all positive, but it wasn't any negativity. And I think that's a good example for everybody talking about city issues. We tend to, go to one side or the other. And he obviously is very opinionated and driven, but he's willing to listen and see the ability to be wrong. And knowing he might not always be right, that's just a really tough stance to take when you're a leader. And I thought he did it very well.
I would like to clarify for our group, when we first met and convened, in a safe place, I was asking some of my hard questions, and just so you all know, I got my questions answered. And I had information that wasn't entirely accurate either. So just saying that there was some follow-up to that, and the chief and I had a good discussion about how to deal with information that comes our way and how to vet it and how to clarify it. And he gave me confidence also that that's the first place I go if I ever have questions.
Okay, well, we really appreciate your time today. Again, thank you very, very much for not only today, but all the process leading up to it. Great to have all the department representatives here. Glad you folks could make it too. And we'll definitely look forward to the next steps here. We'll go visit with the interim chief now and talk about the kind of outline for next Monday. So, but again, thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your week. So, thank you.